Well, we begin in Turkey, where the parliament is expected to vote in the next few hours on a government motion to deploy troops to Libya. Ankara supports the UN-backed government in Tripoli that's fighting warlord Khalifa Haftar's forces. They launched an offensive to capture the capital last April. Turkey says its troops will protect its rights in the Mediterranean and its interests in Libya. Ankara and Tripoli recently signed deals on military cooperation and maritime boundaries. Meanwhile, Greece, Israel and Cyprus are also about to sign off on an agreement to transport gas from the eastern Mediterranean to Europe. Now, that's at odds with Turkey's deal with Libya to extract gas from the sea. Well, Mahmoud Abdelwahed is standing by for us in Libya's capital, Tripoli. But first, let's head straight to Ankara, where Mohammed Adow is live. Mohammed, first of all, is this proposal likely to pass the Turkish parliament?
Yes, very likely, Hala. The ruling party members here in the parliament in Ankara are quite confident that they will be able to pass this bill without much effort, because together with the CHP party, which is allied to President Erdogan's AK party, they are confident that they will be able to pass. It's only the EE party, which is an opposition party with 36 members in parliament, which is so far opposed outrightly to it. But they're saying that is not their final decision, and they are right now meeting in one of the conference rooms trying to figure out how to vote. So yes, it's expected to pass, and we're seeing some sort of an accelerated process with Parliament coming out of recess to discuss this. Turkey is really itching to deploy its troops to Libya.
And Mohammed, just remind us, if you would, what is Turkey's interest in Libya?
Well, the official lines are that Turkey is on the right side of history, supporting a government that is recognized by the United Nations and not, as they say, a coup plotter, meaning Haftar, General Haftar, who is being supported, they say, by some Gulf, European and countries in North Africa, such as Egypt. But the real deal here is Turkey is trying to protect that maritime boundary agreement it signed with the GNA government in Libya, in Tripoli, the one that's recognized by the United Nations. Of course, this maritime boundary agreement gives Turkey not only greater territorial claims on the Mediterranean, but also increases its influence there at a time other countries like Cyprus, Greece, Israel and Egypt are trying not only to extract gas, but ship it to Europe through the Mediterranean. And Turkey had been cornered by that agreement between those countries and had been left out, sort of, and this has now sort of given it greater influence, and it is trying to protect the agreement, knowing very well that if Haftar takes over Tripoli and gets into the capital and in power, then that deal will be obsolete, and that is what it is really trying to avoid.
OK, Mohammed Adow, live for us in Ankara. For now, thank you. Let's cross over to Tripoli now, where Mahmoud Abdelwahed is standing by. Mahmoud, if this troop deployment is approved, how does this change the military dynamic, the balance of power in Libya?
Well, Hala, it will definitely change the balance of power on the ground. As you know today, that all eyes in Libya are on Turkey to see what's going to come out of the Turkish parliament session today. As you know, Hala, that Turkey seems to be the only major military supporter of the UN-recognized government forces in the west of Libya. On the contrary, on the other hand, Haftar's camp have been supported by regional and international powers. Several countries have been rallying behind Haftar, as you know, Hala, including Russia, the United Arab Emirates, Egypt, and France. And today, military commanders in southern Tripoli say that they have been noticing that Haftar's forces have been accelerating the fighting recently in an attempt to proceed towards the capital's city center. It seems that Haftar's forces are trying to achieve an advancement on the ground before Turkey decides to send troops to Libya, as you know, that because this is going to definitely change the balance of power on the ground in favor of the government forces. Also, Haftar's forces seem to be trying to gain more ground before Berlin meeting. As you know, that Berlin meeting is supposed to be held in cooperation with the countries, regional and international countries concerned with the Libyan issue. So it seems that Haftar's forces are trying to gain more ground in this battle to control Tripoli so that they can have a better opportunity on the negotiating table in Berlin. In all cases, the government forces say that if Haftar's forces do not have any legal standing recruiting Russian mercenaries from the Wagner company, then the legitimate government, which is the government of national accord, has the right to bring foreign troops in terms of the military agreement with another legitimate government, which is the Turkish government, Hala.
OK, for now, Mahmoud Abdelwahed joining us from Tripoli. Thank you. Let's stay with this. We're joined now by Sami Hamdi. He's the editor-in-chief of the International Interest and joins us now from London. Good to have you with us here on Al Jazeera. There are so many people weighing in on Libya. Let's focus specifically on Turkey. Why do you think they're getting involved and backing the GNA in particular? Because given the advance of Haftar's forces and the support that Haftar has, I mean, this is something of a gamble, is it not?
First of all, we have to remember that Turkey's actually been supporting the GNA in repelling Haftar for the last 8 months. You'll remember that in the first few weeks of the conflict, Haftar seized Turkish hostages and complained that Turkish drones were halting his advance into Tripoli. It's only because the Russian support over the last 3 months that we've seen Haftar actually make advances. Prior to this, it was a stalemate. But Turkey has another reason to get involved. Anybody who brings out a map of the Mediterranean Sea will see that there is a chokehold forming. You'll see to the northwest there is Greece, to the west there is South Cyprus, and to the south there is Egypt. In other words, it's forming this block on Turkish maritime interests. If Haftar takes control of Tripoli, Haftar is backed by the UAE and by Egypt, both of whom are antagonistic towards Turkey. In other words, it completes this chokehold. This is why Libya is as important to Turkey as Syria. And this is why we see that for Turkey, it's not about Sarraj, it's not about the government of national accord, it's not about rescuing this Libyan government, even though that is what it wants to do at this moment in time. It's ready to accept any government in Libya that is formed by the people or comes out of negotiations, as long as Haftar is not the dominant force, as long as the UAE is not the prime influence, as long as Egypt is not the prime influence, as long as France, which has for many years prevented this development of Turkish relations with the EU, as long as France is not the primary power. And we see from this agreement that's been signed between Greece, Egypt and Cyprus that Turkish fears are not unfounded. They have reason to fear. How can a country such as Turkey be excluded from an agreement in the Mediterranean Sea? The fact that it has been excluded shows that there is a targeted campaign from Egypt, from Israel and from Greece to isolate Turkey, to prevent it from having that access to the Mediterranean. This is all according to the Turkish perspective, and this is why we see that they are ready to deploy troops in Libya in order to prevent that chokehold from actually coming into practice.
And so what implications do you think this move has for the developments in the East Mediterranean? Because there are several interests there trying to exploit natural gas reserves, but also these pipelines getting energy from Israel and the Eastern Mediterranean into Europe. What implications does this move by Turkey potentially have?
I think we have to first and foremost remember that for Turkey, and indeed the attitudes that are coming out of Ankara, we have to remember that they have felt that they have had to force their opinion force themselves on everybody else in order to get them to listen. In Syria, Erdogan wanted a safe zone for many, many years, and he was ignored by Washington, he was ignored by the EU, and he was even ignored by Russia and Iran. Only when he threatened to enter unilaterally did the Americans back down and did Russia back down and everybody else and say, okay, Erdogan, now we understand you have security issues, we'll give you the safe zone. In other words, Turkey is saying, I have cried out for ages and said to you guys, let's cooperate on the Mediterranean. Let's share this gas. Let's talk about exploration rights. Let's sit at the table and negotiate. Everybody's been ignoring Turkey because it's becoming a more expansive power. It's becoming a strong country. It's no longer a third-tier category country. It's no longer on a par with Saudi Arabia and Egypt. It has surpassed these countries and become a country that can actually impose its will on the international community and sit at the negotiating table with the likes of Russia, with the likes of the US. So when we talk about the impact of the Eastern Mediterranean, the choice is not necessarily for Turkey to take. The choice is on the countries to say, look, do we bring Turkey to the negotiating table and listen to some of Turkey's concerns, not respond to all of them, but some of them, so that Turkey doesn't feel that it has to use force? Or are we so terrified of Erdogan? Do we believe that Erdogan, because he lost Istanbul, he might lose the elections that are coming in the next elections? So let's be patient. Erdogan will shout for a while. He'll try to use force, but in the end he'll lose. And then we'll have a more insular Turkey once again. We'll have the likes of Imamoglu and CHP. And that insular Turkey will make sure that Turkey no longer exerts itself on the foreign policy. This is the gamble that Greece, Israel and Egypt are having. They are gambling that Erdogan will lose the next election, so there is no need to listen to him.
Okay.
And this is why we see Turkey flexing its muscle. This is why we see Turkey insisting that it has to get involved in Libya.
OK, I'm sorry to cut you off there, Sami Hamdi, but we are out of time. Great to get your thoughts, and thank you very much indeed for joining us there from London.